Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Sadasiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Shankaram Shankaracharyam Kesavam Bhadarayanam Sutravashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha. Good. Today is a Wednesday, means the Mandukya Upanishad. A number of you were not here last week, so I won't pick on you and say, what did we discuss last week? But if you did gather the notes together and had a look, are there any questions from last week? Things that came up, things you found intriguing, things that you didn't really understand at all that you'd want to discuss now? Anything?
I had a point I wanted clarifying, possibly.
Okay.
Which is in Karika 6, it says Prajna creates everything, but then sort of goes on to talk about Ishvara creating everything within the text.
Right. Okay. So Prajna is, Ishvara does create everything, of which Prajna is the reflected consciousness within the causal body from the individual perspective. The causal body creates the individual body, but it's Ishvara that creates the totality. So all the individual bodies, as well as everybody else, is created by Ishvara. So it could be that I just got the words wrong in the text and I need to correct. So where did it say that in Karika 6?
So in Karika 6, the actual translation of
right.
Is it's an established fact that origination is only for those beings which are existent. Prajna creates everything. Purusha creates conscious beings distinctly.
Right. So that should not be Prajna. That should be so in fact that should, if anything, be Maya, or Maya Shakti creates everything. So if we separate out the two, in that translation of Karika 6, the Ishvara's creation is in two aspects. One is the material creation and one as the intelligent creation. The Purusha is in this verse, the separation of the conscious being distinctly created, and Prajna here, I think, is incorrectly said. That should be Maya, I would have thought. I will take a look at that again and review it, but well spotted.
Okay, I had a second query in that block of text. Actually,
right.
It's at the bottom of page 26. It then says total level prana is the causal universe. In this Karika, prana is the causal universe, i.e. the Maya principle. And I was just a bit confused in that, is that the same as the sort of prana energy sort of
so I think this is where the confusion is in Karika 6 also. In Karika 6, where it says Prajna, I've got an extra J in there. It should say prana creates everything, because prana is sometimes used as an alternative word for the causal body.
Right.
Okay. And in some text, you'll find prana is used as the causal body. And I think in the text somewhere, I actually did say because prana shakti is available in the causal body because you clearly the body is kept alive and it wakes up from deep sleep. Sometimes the causal body is also called the prana.
Right. Okay, that then leads me on to. Oh, okay. I think I've got my head around that. The third, yes. If that's the way it ran out, my third query was prana being in the text, prana being the cause of everything, or in the sloka, prana being the cause of or creating everything,
Yeah.
and then prana is the causal universe.
Yes.
So
So prana here is because it's the causal universe. That's the physical cause. That's the material cause of the world. It creates everything. And then the consciousness principle here in Karika 6 was termed Purusha.
right,
Is the intelligent cause of the universe. So it's an alternative wording that Gaudapada uses in his Karika 6, and because he uses it, it was necessary to introduce prana as an alternative name for causal universe.
okay, I think that's cleared it up.
Okay. Phew. All right. Anybody else has as I said before, if I just gave these as talks and didn't give notes, I could always deny anything that got brought up subsequently. It's the fact that you've got it written down. You can say, on page 26, paragraph 3, word number 5, it says, and you're right, I did add an extra J. It should
Right.
be prana, and I was in automatic mode. Or maybe it's just my correction that just did it. Okay, so anything else that's raised?
I had a second question.
Carry on. You're doing well.
Which is in Karika 9, it
Yeah.
talks a lot about Bhagavan. Now, is Bhagavan more Ishvara or more Brahman?
Bhagavan is more Ishvara than Brahman.
Yeah.
All right. Bhagavan is the one who has, I'm sure you remember the translation, is the one who has copious amounts, in fact, an infinite amount of all the 6 properties, including all knowledge, all wealth, all fame, and all those things. You'll find that translation somewhere in the text, I'm sure. So Bhagavan is another word for the Lord, another word for God with a capital G, another word for Ishvara. They're all synonyms.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. See, he has been industrious. Anybody else want to show Tim up by actually quoting that a comma is in the wrong place? I jest. Well done, Tim. Thank you. Thank you for reading the notes and trying to make sense of it. Only by correcting them do we get them even better for another subsequent class that may come at some time or other. So well done for that. If there's nothing else, we actually went through Karika 7, 8, and 9, and then we went into Mantra 7, and I believe we were halfway through Mantra 7. As you know, Mantra 7, I think I said, was the central piece of this Upanishad. These Upanishads tend to be in such a way, sort of gently give you a little introduction, then gradually take you down this road, and this road becomes more and more steep, and then the difficult bit is towards the middle, and then stays in the middle section for a little while, and then goes down towards the end a bit more gentle, and sort of says, did you like that? Upanishads tend to take that sort of format. So Mantra 7 was the most important, and is effectively giving us whole breakdown of Turiya, what Turiya should be. Turiya is the consciousness principle, and there's a long verse. I'll just recite the verse again, and then I'll give you the translation, and then we'll carry on with the explanation that we're going through on Turiya. So mantra 7 translation reads as follows. They consider the Turiya, remember Turiya and Turiyam is the same thing. They consider the Turiya to be that which is not the outward consciousness, not the inward consciousness, not the consciousness turned both sides, not a mass of consciousness, not the all-knowing consciousness, not unconsciousness, beyond perception, beyond transaction, beyond grasp, beyond inference, beyond thoughts, beyond description, traceable through the unbroken self-awareness, free from the world, tranquil, auspicious, and non-dual. It is the Atma, it is to be known. Right. A lot of things that it says is really working on the principle of if you can't describe it with words, you might as well say what it is not, in the hope that what you're left with is actually what Turiya is. So we then went through it and we talked a little bit about what it might be, that that Turiya is not associated with the three states of waking, dream, and sleep, but actually dissociated from all of them. Can consciousness be dissociated from anything physically? And the answer was no. And then we said, can consciousness or Turiya be dissociated experientially? And we said, yes, it appears that way, because surely in deep sleep, consciousness appears to be dissociated, but since it comes back, we know that it was there the whole time. So it can't be dissociated in that either. So it's a question of trying to figure out how we can get to this Turiya that is dissociated from all the other three. Do you recall all of that happening? So where did we get down to? I think we got down to Turiya is not an experiencer. Sort of halfway down.
Feature of Turiya, we got down to all of the parts of that.
All of the parts of that.
Yeah, up to non-duality, Advaita.
Oh, right. Therefore, Turiya is Advaitam, non-dual. When there is no second real thing other than Turiya, every second thing is mithya, and therefore it is good as not there. Okay. So Turiya is called the fourth quarter only figuratively. Remember, we had the 3 quarters and then Turiya came. And we thought Turiya was the fourth quarter. It's called the fourth quarter, but only figuratively. It really is not the fourth quarter, but it's the only quarter available. Vishwa, Taijasa, Prajna are simply names, and only Turiya really is. All right. The other 3 are simply names, and Turiya really is. It's like saying gold, ring, bangle, chain. Right? Even though we can count 4 things, on inquiry you find there's only 1 gold, and the other 3 things, the ring, bangle, and chain, are merely names for the same gold. Only 1 Turiya is present, and in addition, 3 names for that Turiya are given as those 3 states. Therefore, Turiya is tranquil, ever undisturbed, because Mithya universe cannot disturb a Satya Turiya. Mithya can never disturb Satya. Right? One Mithya object can disturb another Mithya object. So a dog can bite a human body, all right, in the waking state. A dream dog can bite you in the dream state. Pain will be felt in both situations. All right. So my body, being the same order of reality as the universe, will be disturbed by it if I were to be bitten. However, the entire Mithya universe cannot disturb me, the Satya Turiya. So how can the non-existent ever disturb the real? So if they're in different orders of reality, things cannot be disturbed. So Turiya is complete, ever tranquil, and free from sorrow. So we need an example here. If Turiam is the screen, Satyam, the movie that's playing on the screen is Mithya because it's dependent upon the screen. The two are acting together, yet one can never interplay with the other, cannot affect the other. Whatever's happening on the movie, in the movie, cannot affect the state of the screen. They are in different orders of reality. If you had a blazing fire as part of the movie, then the screen is not going to get burnt. They exist in a coexistent manner, and we'll discuss this more as we go on. But one, Mithya cannot disturb Satyam. All right. This Turiam alone is the real I, and the other three roles that I play in life are just that. They're roles. They say that life is a play, right? But life becomes very serious when I forget that life is just a play. It's easily forgotten. If life appears meaningless, burdensome, boring, a struggle, then life has become samsara. You are affected by the ups and downs that life brings you. Life becomes samsara when I do not understand my higher nature. What does Vedanta says? It says that by forgetting my real nature, I convert life into a burden. By remembering my real nature, I convert life into a blessing where I can claim my higher glory. Depends on how you look at yourself. So it's best just to make your life beautiful by knowing that you are that tranquil Turiam. Right? It's better to think that you're Brahman than you're this mind and body. Better to think you're Turiam, the consciousness principle, than these other individuals that you have. But this verse has got a very technical word at the end of it. And I wanted to explain this technical word. And in the notes, I put a box around it to try and review the way that Gaudapada wants us to think about it. So let me start on that review. This mantra 7 uses a very specific technical term. In the translation, it was translated as, if I can go back that far, it was translated as traceable through the unbroken self-awareness. Turiam is traceable through the unbroken self-awareness. And that, believe it or not, is just one word in Sanskrit. Of course, it's a compound. Eka Atma. All right. Eka Atma is how it starts. And then Pratyaya Saram. Pratyaya Saram. Ekatma Pratyaya Saram. Because when you start adding these words together, if they got vowels front and back, then you don't use the vowels. So I'm going to copy that for you and put it up on. Because as I said, it's a very technical word and I want you to all understand it. That's the word. You can see Eka and Atma coming together, becoming Ekatma, then Pratyaya, then Saram. These are 4 words compounded together. It means traceable through the unbroken self-awareness. What does that mean? So it's a profound word, and it should be used to understand that I am Turiam. So it's a very important word. Now, the word I always use I associated with one of these 3 states. So I said, can you share it in the written Sanskrit in the notes, please, Ram? It's in the verse, it's in mantra 7. You'll actually see it on there. So I always say I'm either the waker I, the dreamer I, or the sleeper I. Okay, these are my three states. Even though I continuously shift through these three, I do not look upon these three as three different entities. I never say that there is a dreamer I and now there's a waker I. I say, I was sleeping, I had a dream, and now I'm awake. This means that I am seeing the waker I and the dreamer I and the sleeper I as one continuously continuum. I consider the three I's to be the same. Not that the waker I or the dreamer I comes and goes. It is one constant non-variable. That means I consider that the waker I is equal to the dreamer I is equal to the sleeper I. There's no one else involved. It's only I, but I'm in these three states because I understand that the I is continuous, is unbroken self-awareness. Everybody with me so far? So the same I, the waker I, dreamer I, sleeper I consider to be the same I. This is the unbroken self-awareness that goes through all of my three states. The question is, when I equate waker I with dreamer I, what is happening in my understanding? It's a very subtle point. Superficially, the equation is wrong. The equation that says waker I equals dreamer I is wrong. Because the dreamer can never be the waker, and the waker can never be the dreamer. Waker and dreamer are mutually exclusive adjectives. When I say waker I, dreamer I, waker and dreamer are mutually exclusive adjectives. They can never be equal, but we're still seeing them as one and the same. How are we doing this? When we're equating waker I with the dreamer I, we must be keeping aside the two different states of waking and dream and just retaining the I consciousness principle. All right? We're separating out the states and just referring to the consciousness I, which is free from waker or dreamer states. We've studied this before in Vivekachudamani, where you're suddenly presented with an old person with grey hair, and somebody tells you, this is that person. And your friend is trying to say, this 70-year-old grey-haired person in front of you is your old college mate from 50 years ago, and you remember him with dark hair. All right? And when you say, this is that person, you're equating the same person, but you're ignoring the hair. You're ignoring the adjective, but you're saying, this is that person. All right? The person is the same. The hair is different. You're keeping the individual, ignoring the hair. In the same way, whenever we are equating the waker, dreamer, and sleeper, we're giving up on the different states and referring to the Turiam I. When I say that I dreamt and now I am awake, the dreamer I is now the waker I. And the word I is referring to the Turiam without these opposite states of waking or dreaming. The recognition of the waker I, the dreamer I, and the sleeper I as one and the same is an indication for the Turiam persisting in all the three states. That consciousness principle of I persists in all the three states. And therefore the Upanishad uses the word ekatma pratyaya, one common self-awareness. equating the waker, the dreamer, and the sleeper. And this self-awareness reveals the Turiya, which is free from all the three states. Therefore, through that saram has a number of translations, but the essence of that knowledge, the trail of the common I, the Turiya, can be recognized. And this Turiya has to be known for liberation. Why does the Turiya need to be known for liberation? How Vedanta says, why study Vedanta? It is the only mechanism for the elimination of sorrow. The elimination of sorrow, the elimination of bondage in samsara is this liberation. Freedom from bondage is moksha. That is the liberation. To know yourself as Turiya, as pure consciousness principle, is the only path to liberation, freedom from bondage. Why? Because as long as you are associating yourself with this mind and body, you are associating yourself with all of the actions that this mind-body creates, the results of those actions, punya, papam, that lead to rebirth, and then another life of samsara. The cycle concludes, completes, and carries on. This Turiya has to be known for liberation. And one of the mechanisms to do so is this mechanism that I've just highlighted. It's very technical, but I have to explain it, right? Because it's the most, all of the other translations you will get in the verse, but this translation of this thing, this common self-awareness, is a very difficult thing to understand otherwise. Apologies for that. Is everybody with me so far? All right. The fact that although we have these three states, and the dreamer is clearly different from the waker, but I use this term of consciousness of I associated with each of them, and I consider that each of the I's in the waker I, dreamer I, sleeper I is the same I. It's a continuous principle. And that continuous principle is the Turiya, is independent, is dissociated from the states themselves. Okay, that's mantra 7. Let's see what Gaudapada makes of these in the karikas to follow. So karika 10 is the next karika. And here the translation reads, being free from all miseries, Turiya is considered to be the Lord, capable of freeing one from misery. It is immutable, effulgent, all-pervading, and the non-dual truth of all beings. So in the 10th karika, Gaudapada describes the essential nature of Turiya as revealed in the 7th mantra. Right. So he concentrates on the pure consciousness aspect of Turiya. In the 7th mantra, Turiya is revealed as the nature of pure consciousness, not the knowing consciousness. This is a very subtle, but again, a profound difference. Gaudapada says, Turiya is the nature of pure consciousness. It is not the knowing consciousness. In an interim teaching of Vedanta, we often at the middle level say, this is Atma, there's Anatma outside you. You are the knower, everything outside you is the known. The knower and the known cannot be the same. Right? It's a early mechanism to try and separate out Atma, the awareness principle, from everything else in the world. And therefore, this Atma is sometimes considered to be the witness consciousness or the knower. And here Gaudapada says, Turiya is the nature of pure consciousness, not the knowing consciousness. All right? Subtle difference. Consciousness takes on the role of knowing only when the mind joins consciousness. I'll repeat that. Consciousness takes on the role of knowing only when the mind joins consciousness. Consciousness by itself is not a knower, not an experiencer, because it cannot perform any action. Turiam is the nature of pure consciousness. Can consciousness say, I'm consciousness? It's a good question. Can consciousness say, I'm consciousness? No, it can't. Consciousness requires the mind because claiming requires a relevant thought, and thoughts happen in the mind. Claiming, knowing, experiencing, all of these requires relevant thoughts, and thoughts require a mind. In the presence of the mind alone, the process of knowing is possible. Think about it. In the presence of the mind alone, the process of knowing is possible. Turiam is the non-knowing consciousness principle. Consciousness does not require a mind to be consciousness, but it requires a mind to claim that I am consciousness. Right? We're studying this thing. We're studying this with the intellect of our mind. And with that, we can generate a thought in our intellect saying, according to the studies and what Ram is dribbling on about, I've come to the conclusion that I am consciousness. But that I am consciousness is not the consciousness speaking. It's a thought in your mind that consciousness is illuminating. Because any claim that you make has to be a thought. Thought can only happen in the mind. Mind is part of the subtle body, is inert, all right? Is inert, incapable of thought unless blessed by consciousness, by pure consciousness, the Turiam. All right. Well, I didn't know it was going to be this hard. Stay with it. Consciousness is not affected by space and is all-pervading. In fact, space is contained in consciousness. Right? It is non-dual and a non-variable factor. We know something that's all-pervading is incapable of change. Only something that is limited is capable of movement, is capable of change, is capable of time, of freedom within time and space. Something that is all-pervading has nowhere to go. It's incapable of changing. If it's incapable of changing, it's incapable of performing an action. All right. The mind is variable. The mind is extrovert. When the mind is extrovert, it's the waker. When the mind is introvert, it's the dreamer. When the mind is passive, it's the sleeper. Experiences are variable, and the world is also variable. Turiam reveals all the variable factors by its mere presence. So Turiam reveals the extrovert world, the introvert world, even reveals the passive world by its sheer presence. All right. But in itself, Turiam is non-variable. It is Advaita amidst all variable things. What does Advaita mean? Not two. It is Advaita amidst all variable things. It is not affected by time. The body and mind will fade, but I, the Turiam, I do not fade. Turiam is the powerful master of samsara because it is free from afflictions of sorrow. right? I think we studied this elsewhere as well. Something that is satyam is complete. It is everything. Everything there is. If you're everything there is no cause for sorrow because you don't lack anything. Okay? Mithya, on the other hand, is limited because it's dependent on satyam. But mithya can't affect satyam because we said earlier that the two can't interact. And how can something that is non-substantial mithya possibly affect something that is complete, satyam? And therefore, Turyam is the powerful master of samsara because it is free from afflictions of sorrow. In fact, the intrinsic nature of Turyam is ananda. Right. It could be said that even Bhagavan as Bhagavan will be afflicted because Bhagavan here is Ishvara, one down from the Turyam or Brahman we're talking about. These afflictions will affect body and mind, but not the Turyam. The Jiva's ahankara, the Jiva's ego, the Ishvara's cosmic ego will never be free from the afflictions of pain and sorrow. To get free from samsara, we have to hold on to Turyam, Brahman, in other words, as our nature. It's explained in a little bit more detail through the other karikas. Just stay with me here. Karika 11. Vishwa and Taijasa are both considered to be conditioned by cause and effect. But prajna is conditioned by cause alone. Both of them do not exist in Turiya. Now, with the seventh mantra, the Mandukya Upanishad has completed the presentation of the four quarters. Atma as Visva, Taijasa, Prajna, Turyam, which is defined as follows, right? If you want a paragraph that describes the Mandukya Upanishad, is this: I, the consciousness principle, when associated with waking, dream, and sleep states, am called Vishwa, Taijasa, and Prajna, respectively. When dissociated from all the three states and looked at from my own standpoint, I am called Turyam. The method of dissociation is neither physical nor experiential in nature, but in the form of understanding that my association with these three states is only a seeming one, similar to the movie and the screen. That understanding helps me claim my Turyam nature. That is a paragraph, it's in the notes. That is a paragraph that describes how the Mandukya Upanishad is trying to get you to understand that you are the Turyam and you're not these intermediate states. All right. But in these verses, 11 to 15 of the Karika, Gaudapada is making an interesting inquiry. Now that all the four quarters have been revealed, and just to make sure that you've clearly understood all the four quarters, all right, Gaudapada is making a compare and contrast study of the four quarters, taking any two of the quarters at a time. He's playing with us, right? And he's changing the language slightly and presenting it to see if we really do understand it all. He's using certain terminology to communicate this idea, right? In this analysis, he defines Vishwa, Taijasa, Prajna, and Turyam slightly differently. The definitions are only superficially different, but you need to understand them and to explain what this Karika actually is saying. So generally, A person does not know that he is thurium. Right? I mean, you didn't get up this morning, look in the mirror and said, that's a lovely bit of thurium staring back at me. You did not, you generally don't consider yourself to be thurium. This ignorance is common to everybody, to all people. This is self-ignorance. What is it? It's ignorance of my true nature as Brahman thurium. All right? This is self-ignorance because I don't know that I'm thurium all the time. And this self-ignorance leads to self-misconception that makes me identify with the gross, subtle, and causal body, resulting in the notion that I'm a finite, limited, individual, egotistical person. Right? Wherever ignorance is present, there will be misconception. Remember what the ignorance was? Ignorance of my true self, self-ignorance. What's the misconception? That I'm something completely different. I'm this body-mind. Whenever ignorance is present, there'll be misconception. Self-ignorance, therefore, leads to misconception. Okay, so far? In other words, self-ignorance is the cause and misconception is the effect. Self-ignorance of who you are is the cause that leads you to have the misconception that you are something different. That is the effect. Self-ignorance of thurium leads to misconceptions that I am the waker, dreamer, and sleeper. Self-ignorance of thurium leads to misconceptions that I'm the waker, dreamer, or sleeper. Now, Gaudapada explains, who amongst the three has self-ignorance and who has misconception? Because both Viswa, the waker, Taijasa, the dreamer, have self-ignorance and misconception. And thus cause, the cause is the self-ignorance and the effect is misconception. So both the waker, in your waking state right now, you have the self-ignorance of who you really are. And this leads to the misconception that I am this, you identify with this, I am this mind and body. Even the dreamer I does not know that they're thurium. They consider that I'm the dream individual. And this leads to the misconception that they're associated with the dream body, the gross and the subtle. Okay? Is everybody with me so far? Prajna, the sleeper, also has ignorance, but does not have any misconception. Because misconception requires a mind, an active mind, and there is no active mind in the causal deep sleep state. Right? And ignorance without misconception is given another word: bliss. Ignorance without misconception is called bliss. If you don't know anything about something, you can't formulate something, all right? You cannot formulate even the misconception, and therefore you get to a stage where you'll say, oh, I'm really happy. You may be totally ignorant, but you haven't yet created your misconception, and until you do so, you're totally blissful, right? Ignorance is bliss, remember. Unless you create a misconception. To create a misconception, you need an active mind. An active mind is not present in the causal state, right? Because the subtle body is resolved. The sleeper can't say that he is the sleeper in sleep. There is no mind to claim that. The sleeper has cause only. And thurium is free from cause and effect. Thurium doesn't have either either ignorance nor misconception, because everything other than Turyam is mithya. Right? Mithya cannot touch Satyam. Ignorance does not contaminate Turyam, and is thus free from ignorance and misconception. Turyam is the complete. It is not ignorant, and therefore it has no misconception. So Gaudapada gives this message in the following verse, but just to keep us on our toes, he keeps on changing the words of the definition slightly. All right. Karika 12. Prajna knows nothing, neither himself nor others, neither the truth nor the untruth. That Turiya is ever the all-seeing consciousness. So here, prajna is associated with ignorance and therefore does not know anything. Prajna not only does not know other things, it does not even know himself to be the sleeper. There's no active mind. Neither does prajna know what is satyam or what is mithya. Doesn't know anything. Prajna is totally, blissfully ignorant. But Turiya, the consciousness, is always the witness of everything, but not associated with anything. It's the witness of ignorance also, even though it's not associated with ignorance. Witness consciousness reveals both knowledge and ignorance, and yet it is untouched by both. You see how Gaudapada is playing with us in this compare and contrast. What has got, which of these three states have got ignorance, which has got misconception? If I put it in this way, then perhaps you'll start to understand what is happening here as a cause and effect. Karika 13. Here Gaudapada is comparing prajna. Oh, I haven't got the translation here. Sorry. Karika 13. Let me read you out the translation. I haven't got it in my notes. Right, Karika translated says, non-perception of duality is common to both prajna and turiya. Prajna is associated with causal ignorance, and that does not exist in turiya. So what he's saying is he's now comparing prajna with turiyam and contrasting them. He uses different terms. Prajna is now associated with ignorance, and turiyam is not associated with ignorance. This is the contrast. The common feature is that misconception. Duality is absent for both. Prajna is associated with causal ignorance, but there's no effect. In turiyam, the causal ignorance is not present. So there's no misconception in either. In prajna, there's ignorance. In turiyam, there is not. That's how prajna and turiyam are different. Karika 14. These are very short verses, so I'm just rapidly going through them. The first two are associated with dream and sleep, but prajna is associated with dreamless sleep. Wise people see neither sleep nor dream in turiya. So the same idea presented with different terms. Now he's talking about dream and sleep. The first two quarters, remember first quarter, Viswa. Second quarter, Taijasa, are associated with misconception and ignorance. We read that a few verses ago. The ignorant waker, he now says, is spiritually a dreamer. He just wants to mess with us. The ignorant waker is spiritually a dreamer. All right. Only a jnani alone is truly a waker. So in your waking state, you use your mind, the intellectual capability of your mind, to know that you are Turiam, and you claim, I am Turiam. A jnani claims that I am Turiam. Somebody who's awake but ignorant of that is spiritually a dreamer. In spiritual terms, they don't know who they are. They're in a dream. Right? Prajna is associated with mere ignorance, sleep, without misconception, a dream. So he switched the terms now. He's now calling ignorance is sleep. He's calling misconception is a dream. Wise people will see neither ignorance, sleep, nor misconception, dream, in Turiam, and will claim that they are that Turiam. Remember, jnani, in the waking state, knows that he's Turiam, can only claim Turiam if he uses the mind of the waking state with his intellect, because only the intellect can claim his Turiam, right? Because you need a thought in order to make a claim. These verses feed one upon the other, and it takes time to read through them. Once I got you captive, I might as well go to Karika 15. All right. Dream belongs to one who takes the Atma differently. Sleep belongs to one who does not know the Atma. When the flaw in these two is gone, one attains the goal of Turiya. So in the previous verse, Gaudapada uses the word, in the Sanskrit, he uses the word nidra for sleep and swapna for dream. If you look at the Sanskrit, you'll be able to pick those up. They are not regular expressions, and in fact, they're loaded with special meaning, which he's trying to explain in this verse. Dream, in Vedantic parlance, refers to misconception. Right? And the colloquial expression of dream in Vedanta means misconception. And we use that in our daily lives. We say, oh, somebody is dreaming. All right? They're dreaming that they can do that. It's a total misconception. Even a waker is a dreamer as long as they have self-misconception. All right. Now, sleep in Vedanta is ignorance of the true nature of the self as Turiam. As long as these two are present, samsara will never end. What are these two? As long as sleep, in terms of ignorance of your true self, and dream, the misconception that you are something completely different, as long as these two are present, samsara will never end. Right? When we eliminate misconception, we get a temporary respite from samsara. When do we eliminate misconception? When do we eliminate misconception? We get a temporary respite from samsara. This happens in deep sleep. There's no misconception in deep sleep because there's no active mind to come to that misconception conclusion. There's no misconception in death, right? There's no active mind in death either. Nor is there in dissolution of the world. If you're in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, there is no misconception. An active mind is not there. But when you come out of these positions, the samsara will continue afterwards. They'll continue when you awake. They'll continue in a rebirth. They'll continue when you come out of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. All right. When both ignorance and misconception are eliminated, you attain Turiya. That's the definition of Turiya. Turiya is elimination of the ignorance. What is ignorance? Self-ignorance of who I really am. And then you also eliminate the misconception that that yields, which is, I am something completely limited. When you eliminate these two, you attain Turiya, which is nothing but claiming your own glory. If Turiya is infinite, Turiya you are. You don't have to attain it. You already are that. Because something that is infinite cannot come and go. So you must already be that. The only reason you don't know that is because you're ignorant of who you are, self-ignorance. And that is leading to the conclusion, I'm this limited mind body. That leads to samsara. All you have to do in a moment, self-enlightenment is a flick of the fingers in another perspective to say, I'm the Turiya. I always was. I always will be. I can never not be. Everything else is just a role, is a misconception. So he's now referred ignorance by 4 words. Ignorance, non-perception, sleep, and cause. All right? And misconception, sometimes he's called it error, ahankara, ego, non-apprehension, right? Dream or effect. So he's used lots of words for these two things. Ignorance, self-ignorance, and misconception. And Turiya is free from both the problems of ignorance and error, ignorance and misconception. Ignorance of Turiya is a problem for entire humanity because that is the cause of samsara. Ignorance of your true nature as Turiya is the problem for everyone because it is the cause of samsara. Ignorance by itself does not cause the problem. Right? Not knowing who you are does not cause the problem. It's ignorance mixed with the error, the misconception, that causes the problem of samsara. Not knowing who you are and thinking yourself to be the limited mind body is these two together that causes the problem of samsara. Because when you feel limited, you're always in a state of wanting, of becoming something else. You are always in a state of lack. And this creates the raga dvesha, the likes and dislikes to perform actions. The desire drives action, action drives results, results drive consequences, consequences drives rebirth, and you fall back into a samsara cycle once more. Right? So, ignorance by itself does not cause the problem, but it has to be mixed with misconception or error. How do we know? It's a wonderful statement, Ram. How do you know? During deep sleep, we only have ignorance. Do we have samsara in deep sleep? No. We have no misconception in deep sleep. You need the self-ignorance, you need the misconception to get samsara. But the samsara comes back on waking. Why? Because the ignorance and the misconception, the ignorance and the error has now returned together. Right? Both ignorance and the error have to be eliminated for the elimination of samsara. Error alone, error here means misconception, error alone cannot be eliminated for good without removal of the ignorance. Therefore, error needs to be removed for the elimination of samsara, and ignorance has to be removed to prevent error coming back again. This misconception of who we are needs to be removed in order to eliminate samsara. Right? We must not have the identification with the mind and body. If we eliminate that, we can eliminate samsara. But we need to eliminate ignorance, self-ignorance of who we are, to prevent the misconception coming back. A jnani who has eliminated both attains thuriam, as it were. As I said, attains thuriam, comes to realize, can claim that he is always was thuriam. A turiya jnani does not know thuriam as an object. He claims thuriam as himself when he attains thuriam. And thuriam is ever free from samsara because it is free from self-ignorance, free from the error, which is the effect, the misconception that is the effect of this ignorance as the cause. I played with your minds enough for the one night, I think. There's two more karika that go into this. Sorry, there's three more karikas, 16, 17, 18. This is really the culmination. These three karikas are the culmination of the Atma Vichara. Remember, the inquiry into Atma, which was mantra 2, because the Mandukya Upanishad has these two topics. Mantra 1 said Omkara Vichara, inquiry into Om, and mantra 2 was Atma Vichara, inquiry into Atma. We've now done all the verses from 3 to 7. The Upanishad dealt with Atma. The karikas, we've dealt with the first set. Now we're dealing with the second set of karikas that explains the Atma Vichara section, and that will culminate in karika 18. And then next week we'll finish with these karikas and we'll go on to the next verse, mantra 8, which will be the start of the analysis of the Om Vichara, Omkara Vichara, inquiry into the sound Om, into the syllable Om. Does everybody understand how this Mandukya Upanishad is structured? This is quite technical, right? This requires a fair amount of reading. And I hope I've got my notes right, because you need to read over this and you need to get these ideas in your head of the three states and thuriam. The three states are all play. Thuriam is the only thing that's real. Thuriam does not have these properties of misconception and self-ignorance. Which of the other states has which of these, and how is it affected? All right. And that's what makes them different to thuriam. That's the explanation that Gaudapada is trying to give us in these verses. Questions? I could have carried on, but some of you are the eyes are rolling over a little bit and glazing. Yes.
Could I ask a question? Because I think I've got a little bit muddled from something that you've taught us in a previous course. And it was this idea that there's the known and the knower. And then you could then say that the knower is known to another knower, and then you keep going back and back and back and back, and you eventually get to the ultimate knower, who is what I thought was Brahman. That's where I kind of left my understanding. But then today you said that Durin is not knowing, so therefore then it's not a knower, which means then actually my thinking of how the knowing thing went all the way back to Brahman is actually not correct. So now I'm a bit muddled.
Yes. And this is classic Vedanta. So I performed the teaching so that you are absolutely clear on what it was. All right. And so I've got you to do this interim stage of separating the knower and the known. All right. And in that way, you've got this idea of Atma as being separate from Anatma. All right. The known. And this is a very difficult first stage to get to. And Vedanta typically does this. It says, I'm going to explain this to you, and it's going to take many verses of an Upanishad. Do you really understand? Do you really? And you say, yeah, I finally got that. And it says, sorry, that's not the way it is. Let me go on to the next stage of the understanding. All right. If you shine a light upon two rooms, all right, and one is dirty and the other is clean, the knowing of that dirtiness or cleanliness is as a result of the light, but the light does not itself know. The light is that by which the cleanliness of the room is revealed.
Yeah.
But the light never knows, right? It's not partial. It says, I'm only going to beam upon a clean room. It has no idea. It's incapable of thinking. So Brahman, Turyam, in the Mandukya Upanishad, is that by which things are known. That by which thoughts and actions are known. It is not the knower, because the knowing process is a thought. But you need to understand the knower and the known, because it helps in that interim stage of separating yourself as the awareness principle from things that you are aware of. So it's a halfway stage. I'm sorry to have used the technique, but they've been using it for thousands of years. It's a part of the teaching process to get to that interim stage.
That's really annoying, because that made sense when it was described like that. And now it's just spraying everything out. So no, it's completely different.
it's like saying, telling a little child, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, because you want to get this principle of there's a constant movement in the sky, and that is the east and that is the west. All right. As the child gets older, you say to the child, well, actually, the sun does not rise at all. It's us that's spinning in the opposite direction that reads to what looks like the sun rising from the east and setting in the west. So that interim understanding is that the knower and the known, right, are different. The owner and the owned are different, because it's an easy concept to get into our minds at an early stage. And then you go on to the stage, if Atma is non-dual, if it is unlimited, then it's capable of action, including the action of knowing. Right. So Shakshi Chaitanyam, which is translated as the witness consciousness, as I've joked before, witness here does not mean build a barn in an afternoon type witness. Right? It is that by which something is known. It's the light by which it illumines that which can then be known.
So it kind of leads to my other question.
Right.
So I guess in the understanding of the light being consciousness, and then obviously thinking of us as buckets of water, and then obviously reflecting in that, then maybe it's a question for another time, or maybe explain later, then the understanding then of what consciousness is then, because obviously it's not anything linked with knowing or I think I've just got totally confused now.
So you have
very simple explanations
right.
to kind of get you to the next stage.
Yeah, you have to ask yourself, does awareness know, or is it because of awareness that knowledge takes place?
Because of awareness.
Right. So consciousness is that awareness. It's not consciousness that knows. It's because of consciousness that things are known.
Okay.
Right?
I think it makes sense.
And that bucket example, the pot example, the one sun up in the sky, the number of pots, each filled with water. The water represents the subtle body. The body of the pot represents the gross body. The reflection of the sun, one sun up in the sky. So one Turiam, one Brahman up in the sky, reflected in every pot gives a separate, complete reflection, right? That reflection in the three bodies of waking, dreaming, in the three states of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, that reflection we call Vishwa, Taijasa, or Prajna. All right.
Right.
Turiam is the one sky, one sun up in the sky. So, but because of the reflection, because of the totality, this awareness as the reflected consciousness believes that it is all there is. Right? Vishwa, the reflected consciousness during the waking state, is ahankara, the ego. And up until you came to these classes, you always thought that the ego was me, I. In fact, that's what is translated as. Ego is I. It does not realize that it's a reflected consciousness. And that's why I, the ego, travels with the mind. Why does it travel with the mind? Because it's reflected in the mind to create a reflected consciousness. So when the door opens and the body leaves the room, the ego leaves with it. It travels. It's limited. It's limited to the body and mind. Whereas the one original consciousness is unlimited. Right? It shines everywhere, all the time. But the reflected consciousness is limited by the reflective medium. The reflective medium is the mind, is associated with the body, and it walks about on two legs. Okay? But we take ourselves to be Vishwa, Taijasa, or Prajna. These are the roles we play. Not at roles at the minutiae level of I'm a mother and a wife and a daughter. Not at those roles, but a role as I'm the waker, I'm the dreamer, right? I'm the one in deep sleep, I'm the sleeper. Those big roles, Gaudapada is saying, is not the real you. It's only the Turiam, the one sun up in the sky, the original consciousness. That is the real you. The rest of it is just a reflected consciousness. All right.
Thank you.
Sorry to burst your bubble in taking
you did
so far down the road and then say,
right.
right. Well, at least I haven't got to the stage of there's no such thing as gross body and subtle body and causal body yet. Once you've fully understood these three states and how things are reflected, then we'll go on to the next stage.
I'm not ready for that yet.
It's all it's just building up knowledge, little foundational bricks, and then gradually building up knowledge and getting higher and higher to the ultimate truth that to get rid of this self-ignorance of who I really am. That is the only way to remove samsara. Okay. Any other questions? Anybody else's bubble that I need to burst at this stage? No, but it's a very good question, though. Well done. Well done, you, for remembering all of that in the past, having it affect you to get a full understanding, and then to be crushed in another class completely, and to be able to have the courage to ask the question. So well done, you. This is not easy. Very few attempt it, Very few people study, and even fewer get it. All right. And as I've said before, the reason you're all here now is because you've studied this before. Not necessarily in this life, but you've studied it before. And there's been an earnest desire to know more. And that's what's led to you listening to me on a Wednesday evening when there's far other better things to watch on television. Any other questions? No? No? Maggie, makes complete sense?
Listen, it makes complete sense when I'm reading it in the notes. And then when I shut the notes, there's nothing left in my head. It just all goes away.
That's why it just needs to be reiterated over and over again.
Over and over and over.
Over and over again. And Vedanta is, as I've said, is not preaching, is teaching. So first of all, presents, you have to do the first Shravanam, you have to listen intently to try and understand what has been said. You need to read the notes to say, oh, that's what he meant. All right. Then Mananam comes, and that's when the analysis comes. And so sometimes in the Shravanam, we actually ask the questions that seeds the Mananam process later. So when you sit down later in quiet contemplation, you can say, oh, there is a question here. I don't get this bit. I don't understand how this ties in with that, and so forth. Then that leads to a question. That leads to greater clarity, and we go forward in that way. That's what it's all about. Will says that that's why I'm still here after a few years in the group. Yes. But through the different Upanishads, you get the same thing presented in a different way. You'll never get Turiam in any of the other Upanishads. It may have a passing mention, but it'll never be explained in this way. Each Upanishad has its own particular part. That's what makes it so brilliant. Explaining exactly the same thing. You're nothing but Brahman, right? That's the only Satyam. Everything else is Mithya. We'll get onto arguments, in the next 3 Karika. There's actually some really good questions that people could ask to try and break this wall of knowledge down, and we'll go through that analysis next week.
I will just say that I had a new neighbour knock on my door, and she's very religious, and she asked me if I'd like to go to church with her on a Sunday morning. And so I said I didn't go to church. And then she started saying about, well, God is this and God is the creator. And I found myself really, wanting to speak with her, but nothing. All I wanted to say is there is no creation.
Oh, then she thought you were an atheist. You should have said, but there is a God. There is no creation, but there is a God, and that God is me, and that would have put her in a real tailspin.
Freaked her out.
Yeah, that would have put her in a real tailspin, and she thought, she would mark a big sign outside your door so that people never came in through it again. So that would have been interesting. But yeah,
but you do have to be careful, because of course we are where we are because we've been talking for so many months. But of course, you have to be very aware of how other people are feeling.
Yeah. And you have to be aware that these interim stages are necessary. They're mandatory, right? These intermediate, what are the intermediate stages? First of all, you think that, that there is no such other thing. All this, the fact that the world appears to be given to you because you are not instrumental in designing a single blade of grass out there, let alone how chlorophyll works, right? You say, oh, that's all random. You start with an atheist point of view, and then you have your own particular, you start to realize that some things are beyond your control. So you define your own personal God and say, dear God, I would like this. You ask for material things from your chosen God. That's stage 1. And then you come to a better understanding, which is what the indigenous people have, when they realize that everything is God, right? So most religions haven't got there yet. The Aborigines and the Red Indians had thousands of years ago, but most Western religions, most other religions hasn't got there yet. And that's simply to ask the question, if God is the creator of all these things, where did he get the material? All right. And then when you ask that very important question, because if God is creator of everything, right at the beginning, there's just God sitting there, right? And he obviously created this world. This world is full of material things. Where did he get the stuff? All right. And then you come to the conclusion the stuff must also be from within God himself. And therefore God the creator and God the stuff becomes one and the same. Therefore everything that is in creation is the if you like, the body, the material is also from, it's the second level of understanding, right? Most people don't even get close to that. They're still at stage one. You know, dear God, give me more money. It's the first stage, material God. And then the final stage where Vedanta helps is to say, yes, there is the God, the material cause, and the intelligent cause. It is the one underlying Brahman. That Brahman you also are. So it's a question of, first of all, God the creator, then God the evolves into everything in the world, and finally God appears as the world. It's a very difficult three-stage process of understanding. All right, it's not trivial by any stretch of the imagination.
You must have great fun when Jehovah's Witnesses come to your door.
I don't even bother. I say, oh, I'm another religion, Hindu or something, or I speak to them in Bengali, and that seems to turn them off because none of them appear to be Bengali speakers that I've had so far. So that takes them away from the door, and I just do gibberish at them if they do come in. Actually, they haven't come back twice, so. It works. Just speak to them in another language and say that you just don't understand. I'm just a humble Indian. What would I know? So that's the way to do it.
Say, if you get people like that, a good question to ask them, which I've done, is like, if you say to them, where is God then?
Yeah.
And usually that stops them in their tracks. Usually they can't answer it.
Yeah. And if they're really devout, they say up in heaven. Right, and it's always up. They never point downwards. They say up in heaven. So even if you're in Australia, it's up in heaven, and it's this idea that a God who's all powerful, all right, omnipotent, omnipresent, is everywhere. That this God that is everywhere would be in a fixed location. It just doesn't. People just don't understand how you can have a formless God that is stuck in an apartment up in heaven. I mean, how can you do that? The logic just breaks down. If God is formless, then God is all there, manifest as everything, and is everywhere. How can you have a location for it? And if you have a location for God, who created the location before God moved in? I mean, it falls down, logically it falls down at so many levels so early, but you're not allowed to say these things because then, you'll go down to hell and Satan will deal with you. And I said, well, if God is supposed to be everything, then isn't God Satan also? The good, the bad, and the ugly must be your God because it's a complete God. So, oh no, our God is the good God. This other people's God is the bad God. And then they lose me at that point completely. I just go loopy. It's a very simplistic analysis. You have to have analyzed this for a very long time at a very intelligent level to eradicate these problem questions. And modern religions just haven't. So that's why this is not a religion, all right? This is a philosophy. Well, it's actually not even a philosophy, but anyway, it allows us to come to know. That's what it is. What do we do? Do we normally finish? We're quite late, so we won't finish with the meditation, shall we? Okay, Lorraine, bye-bye. So all I'll say is that next week we'll go on to the Karikas, 3 more Karikas, and we might get the first mantra of the Omkara Vichara, the inquiry into the syllable Om. And that'll form the second part of the Mandukya Upanishad. Are you enjoying it so far? It's tricky. Upanishads are always tricky. This one is more tricky than most. I may do a simple one as the next one in the new year, just so that we can all do a nice, happy, sort of bouncy castle type ride through an Upanishad, a nice, easy one to rest our minds. That might be something we try in the new year. As I said, I'm hoping to finish this by Christmas. And then you can all go into Christmas and have a jolly good time. You can leave all of this behind for a while and get your brains back. All right, lovely. Lovely to see you all. Thank you, so many of you, devoting your time on the Wednesday evening. Lovely to see you all.
Shall we have a closing prayer then?
Let's have a closing prayer, and I'll mute everybody and we'll close. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishtate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, everyone.